Good morning, R3, and welcome back. I hope that you had a nice holiday with your family and friends, and that you're glad to see the R3 family again as we get started in the new year. Today you're going to be watching a video with lots of our colleagues, and you're going to see classrooms where they are incorporating literacy, as well as you're going to hear them talking just in an interview style about what is working well for them across the content areas. I think you'll be really impressed with what our kids are getting and how we have increased the ability for them to read and to write, and giving them stronger opportunities to increase our rigor across the board. Please stay in a relentless pursuit to incorporate literacy. It really is important, and the benefits we get go into all sorts of areas. This will help our students on ACT testing. This will help them articulate themselves better in the written word when they're applying for colleges. This will help them on a day-to-day basis to get to higher order thinking, which is always our goal, to keep students at DOK 3 and 4. So please continue the relentless pursuit. If you feel like you haven't started yet or haven't gotten a good bearing on how it works, take note of who's in this video. Go up and ask them for help. We're here to be a collaborative community, and we all have a talent pool here that if we maximize that, we can do extraordinary things for our kids. So please don't hesitate to reach out to a colleague who's on this video. We're kind of at halftime right now, and my dad always put things in sports terms for us. So I feel like we have finished halftime, and we're going into the second half of the football game for the end of the school year. And I encourage you all to finish strong. I know that winter is tough, especially with snow days and all the activities that are going on, the hustle and bustle of keeping our families going and our teaching going. But you all do a tremendous job and change the trajectory of kids' lives all the time. So please know the good work you do is very appreciated, and that you are making a difference in kids. Even if they don't come up and say anything, remember our mission, and that is to maximize the potential learning of all of our students. I want to close by thanking you for cultivating literacy in our district. Thank you for having an open mindset and a growth mindset if it's something that you're not very comfortable doing, and taking those risks in the classroom, because that's what makes a difference. And as we head to the second half, I wish you the best. I hope you enjoy every day in the classroom with your kids. And most importantly, I also hope you enjoy this video. I think you'll like it a lot.
And something right from the start of the year that was a focus for our department was that we were going to utilize writing at least once every 2 weeks or so and make that a solid lesson. And one of the things that we tell our students is that they need to be able to express themselves and not just fill in a multiple choice or something like that. That doesn't really show us that they really understand what the topic is. And if they were able to express themselves in written word, that really gives you the best idea if they really know and comprehend what you're trying to get across. And it's an easier way for them to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Expand on the thought or expand on the topic. There's not a question that's asked in our classroom that we don't follow it up with why. Even if it's a multiple choice, we're going through something, I'll say, okay, we'll read the question, and they'll say, well, the answer's C. I said, okay, depending on what the question is, if I can't ask, why is it C, why is it not A, B, or D? So explain to me why these are not the right answer. And those are the types of things that they know they're going to have to answer when they raise their hand. It's not going to be a guess, like, oh, well, the answer's C, maybe? Okay, well, I'm going to ask why, so if it's a guess, that's something that maybe we have to talk about as a class, and if I'm not getting hands, then I talk them through it so they understand the thought process behind it. So we try to have them thinking on all those levels in every lesson, no matter if it's an actual writing lesson or if it's just run-of-the-mill, give me the answer here. And we're moving away from these multiple choice questions altogether. I think at the beginning of the year, we have 80% of it's going to be either like matching or multiple choice. Now we're to about 50% of it is. And one of the good examples that we had was we were talking about mercantilism. And one of the questions that we had was not, tell me what mercantilism is, or choose one of these as an example of mercantilism, but we showed them a picture of the Queen of England sitting at a table, and we had three servants there, and they were holding raw materials. And we said, tell me how, so the question on the assignment was, tell me how this is a good representation of mercantilism. So what they had to do was, they had to know what mercantilism was, but that's not what they're telling us. They're going to expand on that knowledge that they have and apply that to the situation they see on there. And at first, we had maybe like 20% of them kind of get the idea of what they were supposed to talk about. 80% of them were probably just telling me what mercantilism was or describing what they saw in the picture. But after we gave that to them, then we walked through how we put those two ideas together to answer that question. And we kind of give them one here, another one here, and as we go along, they're going to be able to take information here, put it together for an answer. Even when we put it in our writing, I say, instead of just saying, tell me what you think about this, you have to choose between, pick a side of an argument. Well, that's argumentative essays is kind of what we're towards, and we were doing just paragraphs at the beginning. So we'd walk them through what's an introduction, what's that look like. We gave them a rubric, kind of criteria-based, not length-based, because all the students want to know, how long does this have to be, whatever it is. And now, I have them answer that because I said, what do I always say? It's not length-based. There is not it's not like if I see 4 paragraphs there, that's going to be an awesome piece of writing. Okay, it's criteria-based. Do you have the essential elements of an introduction here? Are you restating the question? Are you clear as to what you're going to be talking about and where you stand on the topic that you're talking about? And then with the supports, do you have a strong statement that backs up your topic sentence? Do you have something that backs that up? Like if it's a quote, like textual evidence, or maybe just information from what you're using to form that opinion. We do a lot of, we don't just have them form an opinion and go with it. We give them some text, either an article or a primary source of some sort, and then they have to come up with an idea or an opinion on that topic, whatever it is, and then they use that to back up their opinion. So we promote, there is not a right and wrong answer here. It's all about how you back up your opinion. It
sounds like a lot of this is critical thinking.
It really is, yeah.
And you're making them really do an analysis before they can get to that.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and every day we go through something like this. Well, this is an English class, and why are we doing this stuff? And we say, well, how in the world are you ever going to be able to express yourself if all you're ever working with is multiple choice, matching, tying two things together? Eventually you just train yourself to look for those answers instead of think those answers, and try to pull from things that you've seen before and train yourself to kind of analyze those things as you go along. You say, well, if I'm going to have to put something together here later on, this is something I might need to remember. Or maybe I'm starting to form my opinions as I go and decide why I'm making those opinions. Because everybody's got their idea on certain topics, and those are great. But you need to be able to tell me why you feel that way. Just like if we're having an argument, you can't just say, well, I feel this way, and then I'm going to jump on your side. You're going to have to tell me why. And that's the biggest thing is why. Why are we done so far? And I just have a couple things that I wanted to show you that early on when we first went through the process here where we had our introduction, our 3 supports, and then our conclusion, what we did was first we just had them write it. And then we said, okay, well, before we even told them what the criteria was, see what we come up with. And then we started putting these, showing them this rubric and say, okay, go ahead and grade it based on this rubric and see how critical they can be of their own writing.
So it was a self-analysis.
Self-analysis, and weren't too great at that at first, and they're still working on that. But what we did was we took some of their examples and put it up on the board, and we said, okay, now let's all be critical of this. Like, they don't know whose it is. There's not a name on it. I just typed it up, changed a little bit of it just so someone was like, oh, that's mine, you know? They were very critical. They could tell you all the things that were wrong with it, things that were good about it, but then when they see it in front of them on their piece of paper, then they have trouble with it. They have trouble criticizing their own work because they don't want to change it, they don't want to fix it, or whatever the reason is. So after they're done, I say, okay, you're not changing your writing after this. I mean, you're not going to have to fix it. Be critical of it, use the rubric, grade it. Okay, so the grade that they're going to get from me is based on how critical they can be of their writing. If they say everything's great, 10 out of 10, I said, hey, I'm going to be very, I'm going to go through that with a fine-tooth comb if you're saying that you're perfect. Because I could even write something and come up with things I got to get better at, things I can find. So you got to be able to do that.
Currently, right now, we're developing literacy at a higher rate in terms of the text that we encounter. My goal is to challenge students with rigorous text they wouldn't experience otherwise, books they wouldn't pick up over the weekend. Right now we're finishing up a short story unit. One of the main strategies I've found successful while encountering these difficult texts is having students sort of question the text themselves. I find it a lot more interesting for students to create the questions that they have with the text, because it shows they're like grappling with it and coming up with their own questions rather than me standing up at the top of the board and saying, all right, 1 through 5, here's what I want to know. Instead, by having students sort of create and answer their own questions, they guide our discussion, and then we can sort of really meet them where they're having struggles or difficulties. And it's been an interesting way to kind of start a discussion. Well, I of course guide it where I want to go, and we hit certain topics, but I think that it's really kind of helped to develop a genuine curiosity in what we're reading. And so I always find that whenever students are curious about their reading or intrinsically engaged, it leads to higher level thinking and higher level discussion. I really do like the approach of meeting the students where they are, whether we're talking about science or math or history, because if I get up here and I say, this historical document we're about to read is important because blank, then it's a matter of my credibility. It's a matter of whether I think it's important or whether I don't think it's important. And if you ask 30 students in here, odds are, if I just say, I think it's important, so you should think it's important, some people might politely agree with me or just silently say, whatever, it's school. But a lot of people are like, oh, it's just another thing to throw on the pile. Whereas if we started and said something to the effect of like, why would this be important to you? Or, talk about some sort of scaffolding where it relates to them first, and then you introduce the text. I think that they're already in the mindset of, this connects to me. A lot of our students, well, not that this is necessarily a bad thing, but students love talking about themselves, and they love talking about like their own experiences and their own thoughts, and they'll tell you every single day of the week what they're thinking at any given time. We seem to harness that intrinsic selfishness for like a greater good or a greater power. So how can I apply this topic to myself, and how's this relevant to myself? So we get students talking about themselves first, and then sort of put the text in front of them. I think they can really work in any content area. It just depends on the expertise of the teachers, knowing what is engaging and what is applicable in the real world for their disciplines. And thankfully, I can't think of any discipline in our school that is not directly applicable to the real world. That's nice.
That is nice.
It makes everyone's job easier.
That's true. That's true. Tell me a little bit about how you use writing and how you think writing is an important skill for kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Donald Graves tells us that writing is essentially slowed down thinking, and that's the way I love to think about it. Students, they'll talk a mile a minute, and so some students are able to create well-crafted, perfectly wonderful arguments while they're talking a mile a minute. But for a lot of us, we need some time to think about it. We need some time to really slow down and process. And I think there's no better way to process what you're thinking than to have to form the words and the letters on the page while you're thinking about them. Because then, unlike speaking, you can actually go like, oh, hold on, let me cross that out or erase it, and I can sort of revise as I'm going along. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll pose a question, I'll have students write about it, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then we'll discuss it. And even though we do take a lot of these sort of tiny writing breaks, and we're not writing like essays or like really long paragraphs, but just like really small tiny writing, to get our thoughts out, to get our ideas out, and then we can use that as a basis for our discussion. It's definitely led to a lot more like well-reasoned responses, and still the spontaneity and the excitement of genuine discussion. I found that by allowing students that time to kind of write out what they're thinking, you get a lot more insightful comments, and then also students who might not necessarily, who might need a little bit more processing time, it definitely helps them out, because if I ask a question and they start looking around the room, somebody raises their hand and somebody else might still be processing it, whereas if I give everybody the same amount of time to write about it, then odds are a lot of our people who want to spend more time thinking about it do have that time to kind of jot it down. And so I think that a lot of people in a lot of content areas think of writing as this like very large, massive, arduous task that takes weeks and months of revision and writing. And while certain projects could, I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. I think that if we use writing as a snapshot of a moment, in class like this, or if we focus on smaller writing assignments assigned more frequently, and we can get more feedback on it, rather than assigning the one big quarter paper and then grading it for a few weeks and then giving it back a few weeks later while we've already forgotten what we've done, then I think that that doesn't necessarily lead to the right amount of feedback that we need to give students. Countless research and methods and everything points to the idea that we need consistent, constant, focused feedback. And I believe that you can do consistent, constant, focused feedback with a paragraph as much as you can do with a longer paper.
One of the things that we're doing is each new section that we take on in science, I have the students read and take something they call Cornell Notes or T-Notes, where under the subject headings, what we're really focusing on is I want them to write down the main idea of each paragraph and their vocabulary words. At the end of the section, we will, after a few days, to reinforce that knowledge that they've gained, I will have them summarize those notes in a separate paper. Some of the other things we're doing also to try and promote the higher order thinking is we're coming up with questions outside of the textbook, such as, just to give an example, if we were talking about an electric circuit, I would have the students try to come up with something outside of the classroom that resembles a circuit, and maybe we could label those parts of that circuit in terms of electricity. Quick example, student gets up in the morning from their home, that's where they gain their energy. They ride the bus to school, that's how they transport the energy. At school, they gain knowledge, specifically from my class, but they gain knowledge in science, which of course is where they use the energy, that's our receiver, and then they ride the bus back home again, completing the circuit and relating it to electricity.
So you're having them do analogies.
Yes.
Good. What are you seeing as the benefits for your students when you're doing these kind of things with them? First, let's take the note-taking.
The note-taking, I'm just getting more retention. Now, when we have discussions in class, I don't have to go back over the vocabulary words. I don't really have to go back over the concepts. By doing that, I'm getting more questions about the material outside of the classroom. So it's not just the text, it's not just your base knowledge that they're using. They're starting to ask me questions about the vocabulary, about these concepts, and how they relate to real life situations. Like, my dad does this, or would it have to do something when my mom did this last night? Would that associate with what we're talking about?
So they're making more connections.
Exactly, it's the connections outside the classroom.
And then when you're doing things like the analogies, and they're having to obviously explain that and write that.
Once again, it's the connections. It's all about the connections. It's not just about, and I'll go back to the circuits, it's not just about a circuit being electrical. It's about the connections, the analogies, or the similarities that they can bring in and use those comparisons outside of the classroom.
And what makes you teach this way? Why bother with literacy when you have your own content to take care of and be responsible for? Why are you taking this approach to incorporate literacy?
It helps me with relevance. If a student is sitting there and they memorize a vocabulary word, or they memorize a passage in the book for the test, then when that test is over, they're going to forget that information. If I bring some sort of relevance to it inside the classroom that they can use in their outside lives, or they can at least recognize outside of the classroom, then that information is going to stay in their mind. We have retention, and we have a deeper foundation of learning then.
Sure. One of the things that we've realized when we talk with businesses is that when students graduate from high school and even college, they don't know how to write, especially the business letters. So we teach them the business letter format, but we also show them how to organize their letters with their ideas and the content that they're writing about. So we do different types of letters, like they write a letter to themselves as freshmen, and then when they're seniors, they get those letters back so they can kind of see the differences in their writing abilities. We also write to a celebrity, which is, they really enjoy that. And then they get responses from the celebrities. We've gotten a response from Austin Mahone, a couple authors that they wrote to. Can't think of the other one, but there was another big celebrity that we got a response from, and they get so excited when they get those responses. And then the celebrities write back, and they compliment us on the students writing in the classroom as well. And then we've done a snail mail relay in which they write to another school anywhere in the country. So some of them write to Alaska, some of them write to Hawaii, some of them write to Nebraska. And then we get responses back from the other schools, and kind of to promote the letter writing skill, because with emails and texting, the letter writing is kind of fading, and so we're trying to make sure that stays active and prominent in our classroom and in the business world. So.
Have you noticed when you're teaching that sometimes students don't want to use formal enough language? For example, that the text has...
They do. They want to use the text speak, like you, the letter U for you, and LOL they like to use a lot. And they want to put smiley faces in their letters. I mean, we all text, we use emojis, and that's just not, there's no place for that in formal business letter writing. And so we're trying to teach them that there's a place and a time and a place for the different types of letter writing and text writing and email writing. So there's that difference that some of them don't quite understand yet. So the writing helps them learn those skills.
Yeah, because I would think that would be an important skill with what you're trying to teach them, not just the semester that they have you, but for life's longevity.
Exactly, yeah.
So, what are some of the benefits that you think that the kids are receiving by not just learning, like you said, how to format a letter, but really how to get the right content in? How do you think that's benefiting them?
Their organization skills are getting much better. We are seeing when we write the first letters that they can't quite organize the letter appropriately. And in business letter writing, we want them to be able to communicate and make it short and sweet and get to the point, because business people don't always have a lot of time, so they want to be able to read what they want or get the information from the letter as quickly as possible. So getting them to understand that they don't need to put a lot of words, that they just need to get the facts in right away is important. And so their organization skills, they need to think about what they're writing about before they put it in paper. So the first couple of letters that I have them write, I give them what I want in each paragraph. And then after that, I let them do it on their own, and it's a huge improvement.
So you see student growth
Yes.
in the process of this.
Yes.
And that was actually going to lead up to my next question. Why do you teach this way? I mean, you could just leave it at the format, teach them the business letter format, and let them figure it out. That's how I was taught. I had to figure out how to do my own first letter, you know.
Well, I mean, and like I said before, when we've talked to businesses, and we have an advisory committee, and we invite local business people to come and talk to us about what they want us to teach the students. And one of the key things is that they're not learning how to write properly. And so that is why we teach this, because it is important in the business world to be able to communicate effectively, both orally and in the written format. And so if they can't do that, they're not going to be able to get a job. You have to be able to talk and you have to be able to write.